Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to welcome you to this webinar where we're going to be looking at mobile engagement platforms. Our featured speaker today is going to be Simak Rezezada. He is from Open Market, and he's a partner of EFTs and has been working with us on a number of our events, a number of the things we've been doing at the event. And so I wanted to hand things over to Simak to actually get the ball rolling and tell us a little bit about mobile engagement and what it can do for the logistics industry. Simak?
Thanks, Ali, and thanks everyone for attending today. I'm really pleased that we're able to run this webinar, as I genuinely believe that what we're talking about today can fundamentally change the way that businesses across the entire supply chain operate. You know, it's not necessarily about a specific part of the supply chain, but it is really everyone involved in logistics, retailers, manufacturers who kind of touch elements of the whole supply chain. A little about me. My name's Simak Rezezada, and I've been in the mobile technology space for 8 years or so, and have worked with a number of large global businesses, helping them to identify areas of their business where mobile technology, and particularly mobile engagement technologies such as SMS, can save them money. That's my role at Open Market today, focusing specifically on companies and professionals throughout the logistics industry. Which leads me on to the central idea behind this webinar. In today's world, the ability to communicate information effectively with your audience, be they customers or your workforce, is absolutely critical to the successful running of your business. But it is difficult to identify the most appropriate ways of doing this, as situations and people differ. There are a lot of options out there, and knowing when to use the right one is often the difference between success and failure. Make no mistake, getting it wrong can cost you millions of dollars per year in increased costs or in lost revenue. The stakes are genuinely high. So how did we arrive at this position? Let's take a look at some key market drivers and see if we can figure that one out. So who on this call can honestly deny that technology has significantly changed the market over the last 5 years? You know, I don't think anybody can. It's not really up for debate. But what I want to point out is that in the last 5 to 10 years, at least from a consumer perspective, it's been all about mobile. What began in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone has increasingly put almost every aspect of our lives available at our fingertips. This has completely revolutionized the way that we, and by we I mean, you know, all of us, everyone on this call today, as individuals, go about our lives. You know, keeping up to date with friends and picture sharing seem like obvious examples, but what about shopping? As you can see, what major retailer doesn't have a mobile presence today? How about booking a taxi? You know, look at the phenomenon that has become Uber over the last few years. Planning a holiday, using things like Skyscanner and Airbnb, online banking and money transfer, monitoring your health, trying to improve the way that you live your life. All of the above and many, many more are now possible from this one device that the vast majority of us carry and attend to on a daily basis. The point being, over the last 5 years or so, technology has increasingly driven our attention towards our mobile devices. This is where we all are. And for the most part, which gives enterprises a fantastic opportunity to engage with us. This is where we're sitting, where we're spending our time, where we're spending our attention. And so this is an opportunity now where the vast majority of consumers, their attention is focused entirely on their mobile device. And this presents a great opportunity for enterprises in the logistics space to really start to engage down that channel. Now, the next 5 to 10 years will see significant developments in newer technologies, some of which I've shown here. You know, we talk about all these all the time in the supply chain and logistics space. Airborne drones and their capacity to improve the last mile delivery, driverless cars, wearable technologies, 3D printing, and the intelligent use of big data. You know, I do stress the intelligent use bit there. All of them have the capacity to revolutionize the logistics industry, and, you know, and our consumption of it. In some cases, starts have been made, but we aren't really there yet, and I don't think we'll be there for some time, and lots of analysts will agree with that. This brings me to reiterate the point again. As consumers, our attention is now fully on our mobile devices and will be for the foreseeable future. So as logistics professionals, now is absolutely the right time to take advantage of that. We have this unique opportunity, this window that's ahead of us, where the vast majority of people are mobile, and we need to take advantage of that. We have a fully developed ecosystem of mobile users. So on top of that, are there any social trends that can help guide us towards possibly the best mechanics to use to take advantage of that? We ran a survey of 1,000 consumers in January of this year, with the aim being to discover how they were being communicated with and how they wanted to be communicated with, and under what circumstances. The results genuinely are telling. When it comes to getting in touch with one another on the move, consumers are most likely to turn to text messaging compared to any other method that there is. Over half of those surveys said they send messages the most when on the go. So just about 53% will use text messaging on the go, as compared to around 30% for their mobile phone's call functionality. Text messaging is also the one communication method that truly grabs our attention. A staggering 85% of consumers said that if they had unopened text messages, emails, or mobile app push notifications on their phone, they would open the text message first above all others. I'll say that again. 85% of consumers would open a text message before any other form of communication on their mobile phone. More specifically and kind of relevantly to the logistics industry, SMS was by far the most preferred option of communication for particular pieces of information, including on-the-day delivery information, delivery date notices, and shipping notifications, with half of all recipients stating that they wanted on-the-day delivery information delivered by text. And this kind of leads us to a very important point. For time-critical pieces of information, from a social perspective, the most preferred route is text, as it enables consumers to pick it up quickly and then act on it without it being lost in the noise that other communication channels generate. Ease of communication is absolutely key here, as is ease of response and ease of understanding. So what though? Why do any of us even need to consider this? So let's take a look at a quick high-level economic perspective that I'm sure many people on this call are familiar with. This graph is relevant in an awful lot of industries, but none more so than across the supply chain. Costs are increasing and have been for some time. Things like fuel and workforce costs and so on. At the same time, increasing competition from traditional competitors, new competitors moving up or down the stack into areas of the supply chain, or completely new entrants to the market have put increasing pressures on revenues, ultimately leading to a squeeze on operating margin. As you can see here, that squeeze will continue and potentially worsen as we move into the future. For those that act, those that take advantage of the technology available today, right now in the market, and take advantage of social attitudes towards that technology, have a unique opportunity to reverse this trend and gain a foothold in expanding markets and gain an advantage over their competitors. Those that don't will unfortunately see this continue. So given the circumstances that present themselves, why is it difficult to take advantage of this situation? Let's take a step back and take a deeper look at the problem. The problem really is communicating with people today, despite all the technology that's available to us, is hard. And it's hard for two core reasons. Number one, getting someone's attention is difficult. With so much going on, you need to be able to deliver a contextually relevant message that makes sense in the moment in order to get through. Think about yourself right now. How many pieces of information do you have flying at you every hour, every single day? How many of them actually end up sinking in? The ones that do are the ones that actually mean something to you right there and then that you can act on and make a decision on at that point in time. Anything else probably gets parked for later and possibly is forgotten about entirely. And this is equally true across your personal life and your professional life. So the attention problem really can break down into three parts. One, it has to be the right message. Number two, it has to happen at the right time. And number three, a low effort response is required. And getting that mix right all the time is difficult because it's difficult to get the right message that's relevant to the user. It can be hard to get that message out at the right time. And even if you manage to do all those things, you then need to have your customer or the person receiving the message act on the information. And with all the things that's going on in everyone's lives today, they can't spend an awful lot of time doing that. It needs to be quick, easy, and low effort. The second problem is a fragmentation problem. Now, there are lots of channels out there, so which do you choose? As we've seen, people on mobile, people are engaging on their mobile, so what is the best way of getting information to them and still getting their attention? Ultimately, it differs depending on the situation, and different channels and methods have different results, but critically, people are mobile, but mobiles are different. People use different technologies and exist in different places, so it's difficult to identify what's the best way to reach somebody. So the scale is a big one. It's not something that's intuitively easy to overcome. There's lots of options out there, and the importance is that you need to look at the ways of overcoming it. So let's look at what is out there. Well, you can use email to communicate with people, and email absolutely has its place in the mix for certain types of communication, but it does suffer from low open rates. Typically, less than 25% of emails are actually even opened, never mind read and acted on. Response rates are even lower, in the low single digits. All of us receive an incredible volume of email daily, so it's difficult to really ensure that you all stand out. Additionally, there are circumstances, particularly, for example, in large warehouse environments, where email makes no sense at all for employee communications. How about telephone calls? The oldest form of mobile communication that exists on the phone. It can be an effective mechanism, absolutely, particularly where a lot of information needs to be gathered. I mean, think about all the contact center agents out there right now discussing issues with customers. But it's also invasive, time-consuming, and takes up too much of my precious attention, and everyone's precious attention, as it requires almost total focus. It is also high cost. And in terms of what I've been doing over the last few years, we've seen enterprises reduce their contact center costs by millions of dollars a year by using more automated, socially acceptable mobile technology mechanics, such as SMS, to process certain types of requests. Again, I'm talking millions of dollars a year in savings. Of course, you have in-person. This is even more invasive, requires more time and attention, and has an even more significant cost. And finally, you can always do the fashionable thing and develop an application. Sounds great, and for a lot of activities, this provides a really good, solid user experience. However, it does suffer from some fairly structural problems, including high setup and maintenance costs, and the fact that, quite honestly, you cannot reach the majority of your customers. It's nigh on impossible to develop a mobile application that everybody can use. The number of operating systems and handsets out there really does prevent that. And to even get close, you're looking at spending huge sums of money. But if you do that, and you then you get close to having something that almost everybody can use, there's no guarantee that any of your customers will actually download and use it. Particularly if you need things like registration, which is another huge blocker to getting people to actually engage with you on the mobile application channel. Which brings us on to text. The one piece of technology that really everybody with a mobile phone can use, everybody with a mobile phone has experience of using, and you as the logistics enterprise only need one piece of information to take advantage of it, the phone number itself. The barrier to entry is exceptionally low, but the impact is high. And critically, we've discussed earlier that text is the preferred mechanic in a lot of relevant situations. As we showed earlier, in a lot of situations, people want to be engaged via text. But before going on with this, I want to share another figure with you. If you can take anything away from this webinar today, let it be this one. 95% of texts are read within 5 minutes. Now, if you can tell me any other medium or channel that offers that level of engagement to almost anyone in the world, that they will look at that message within 5 minutes and then can act on it with little or no effort on their part, I'd genuinely like to know about it, and I'm sure everybody else on the call will. So we have a continuing trend here. Consumers are mobile and ready to be engaged on their mobile. They actively profess a preference for mobile-specific communications for critical pieces of information. Text as a technology has a far higher open and action rate than other forms of communication. So let's take a look now at 2 real-world examples where text can be taken advantage of. So a recent study by IMRG in the UK measured the impact of failed deliveries across the supply chain. And there's some genuinely fascinating numbers in this report, and I'd urge you all to take a look. So if you want to drop me an email afterwards, and I'll point you in the direction of the study. But I want to draw your attention to just a few of the numbers in there. In the UK, there is a cost of over £770 million per year due to missed deliveries. That's a huge number. Even more so if you then multiply that up around the world when you're looking at multinational companies. This cost is split between different failure types. Missed first delivery that then needs to be rearranged being the most common at 30% of that figure. And you can see some of the other types here. Missed first delivery with a collection arranged, a late delivery, ending up undelivered, being returned. You can see them all down the right-hand side. The key thing is, though, that we need to get this headline number down, and better communication across the supply chain is a key way of doing that. This total cost is then also shared by different parts of the supply chain. So let's take a look at one of those cases, the most common one, where delivery is missed and needs to be rearranged, and see if there's something more specific we can learn. If you look at the cost, IMRG looked at the cost per event of a missed delivery that needs to be rearranged across 3 critical stakeholders. So that's the retailer, the carrier itself, and the consumer. And you can see the cost here. They're genuine costs per event split out across all 3 stakeholders. For the carrier, on the right-hand side, the associated costs every single time they cannot deliver a package and need to reschedule is £6.53. That's a huge number when you consider how many of this occurrence there is. For the consumer and the retailer, the costs are still significant. Sometimes we might forget that there is a cost to the consumer of this in this case. In this case, it's in excess of £1 per event. So with all that in mind, let's see if we can apply that to the problem and summarize what the problem is. The key problem is that missed deliveries cost the entire chain money, real money, during every single event. We need to reduce, first of all, the occurrence of missed deliveries, and then reduce also the cost of missed deliveries. And in such a time-critical environment, getting the right information against the right person at the right time, using the right channel, is hard. Consumers, they want that information. 66% of users state that in-transit alerts would make deliveries more convenient. And as we have seen, text is absolutely their preferred mechanism from an ease-of-use perspective. So here's a real-world example, already implemented across a number of enterprises that provides this level of information in the preferred format and also gives the user the opportunity to make a change. As you can see, this mechanic deals with both sides of the problem. In the first instance, it says it provides information. Your Acme parcel 123456 will be delivered to you today at 1 p.m. That information is more likely to be delivered by text, more likely to be read, and more likely to be consumed and acted upon than by any other mechanic. And as a result, therefore, reduces the number of misdeliveries in the first place by ensuring that the critical information is right there. And we typically see that having that first part in, where you provide the critical information to the end consumer, typically reduces misdeliveries by between 30 and 40%. Again, a fantastically huge number. But then it also reduces the cost associated with having to make a change where one is required with the second part of the message, enabling the end user to reschedule by texting something back to the carrier. So you're addressing both parts of the problem. First of all, communicating the information, reducing the number of misdeliveries in the first place, but then also reducing the cost associated with rescheduling. That £771 million headline number and that £6.53 cost per event will fall as a result. So that's one example, and one that's backed by a lot of numbers. How about another area that's often sometimes forgotten? Customer feedback. So feedback, though often forgotten about, is absolutely essential to keeping customers and winning new customers. It enables you to identify both strengths and weaknesses, accentuating one and eliminating the other. So let's take a quick look at some learnings here and demonstrate really just how vital it is. So this graph might look a little confusing at first, so let me walk you through it. On the left-hand side, we see that the number of dissatisfied customers who actually go ahead and voice their complaint typically stands at a lowly 4%. Say that again, basically. That means that 4% of customers who have a complaint actually tell you about that complaint. What that leads us to is you have a staggering 96% of customers who have a complaint, but you never hear from them about it. And that's the middle column there. So 96% of people who have a problem with your service or have an issue that they could raise do not raise it. This ultimately leads to the column on the right, which is 91% of customers that do have a complaint never actually come back to spend money with us, and as being potentially the whole supply chain. That's just how crucial it really is. We need to make it easy for people to raise issues, and at the same time give people an opportunity to praise us, although that's not mentioned on this graph. So why is this difficult? Why is it difficult to get this kind of information from people? Why is it difficult to make it easy for customers to raise these concerns? Well, the truth is that polls, surveys, and feedback forms that are sent, frequently it's difficult to tie them to a specific event, and they suffer from a number of issues. They suffer from a really low response rate, and the response rate gets lower the more time that passes. One convincing number that we've seen is that by delaying an opportunity for feedback by even 2 or 3 days, sees the response rate drop by a third, just by delaying a few days. And we're not talking a week or a month, we're talking a few days after the fact. In addition, it's not always easy to pinpoint what the problem is. And if you want to do this, you need to be able to tie a quick question or two to a specific event, which again comes back to the point that being able to trigger these kinds of feedback events to a specific time and place is absolutely critical in actually getting accurate feedback with a high response rate that you can actually act upon. So what's the best way to gather this kind of in-the-moment feedback? So we typically see text-based surveys sent immediately following a specific event, such as a delivery, a contact center call, or an order, generate response rates in excess of 20%. And this is as compared to around 4% for email. So I'll say that again. So 20% is typically the minimum response rate that you would see for a text-based survey, and 4% is typically what you would see for an email trigger survey. Additionally, you tend to see responses come back for a text-based survey within the first 60 minutes. You typically see around 75% of all responses completed by that point. So this is absolutely crucial because it enables you to address any concerns almost immediately without leaving them to linger, turning a negative experience into a really positive one. So using text in this way is particularly straightforward. And here's an example. As you can see, the question is straightforward and to the point. Please rate your experience with Acme Corp from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being excellent. So the question is clear, and also additionally the response mechanic is really low effort, more than a few seconds. All the user has to do is text back 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. It doesn't take long at all. If you want to, if you then want to send a follow-up question based on their response, you can easily do this. We heavily advise things like, "We're sorry to hear that. Can you tell us how we could have improved your experience?" as a free-form question to ask. So these are two small examples, but important ones. We've seen businesses in the logistics space, in the retail space, and in the manufacturing space implementing just these two scenarios. So delivery notifications and customer feedback. So just those two, and then making considerable cost savings across their business, again to the tune of millions of dollars a year, if not tens of millions of dollars a year, depending on the scale of their business. And at the same time, pick up new business by improving their overall customer experience. It really is a powerful, powerful mechanic. So as I said, these are two small examples, but let's take a quick look at what else you might consider across the rest of your business. So the sheer volume of possibilities is really, really quite impressive when you think about it. Because of the ease of implementation, it's a well-established technology that has been around for some time, so the edge cases are known and the implementation is straightforward. The acceptance amongst individuals as a mechanic, from a technology perspective, people are used to engaging on their mobile. From a social perspective, it's how people want enterprises to engage with them, and that's borne out significantly over the last few years. The high delivery and open rates, again, 95% within 5 minutes, and response rates, you'll see anywhere from 20 to 40% response rates, which is 5 to 10 times higher than email. It's applicable almost anywhere. So here's just a few across different areas of the business. A lot of these, particularly around operations and customer service, apply to end consumers, but the opportunity to manage internal operations are just as widespread. I'll pick out a few of note. So if you look in HR and corporate, you'll see things like employee feedback, in almost an identical principle to customer feedback, where your workforce is scattered around a site or across multiple sites. Text-based feedback is an incredibly cost-effective tool to reach and engage your teams. Within the same area, overtime or shift management is another key area where being able to make overtime or shift announcements with a straightforward question with a reply mechanic using SMS is, first of all, a much quicker way of delivering those questions to a large workforce spread over a wide area, and then at the same time, it's quick and easy for that workforce to reply, so that you can then start gathering that data, and then can then start planning your weeks and months ahead. Within IT and security, IT notifications is a really key one, providing critical IT staff with the information they need via an off-network system that won't get lost in the noise of other emails. So we do this ourselves. As a technology company, key IT staff, when there are problems, receive messages via SMS that tell them what the problem is and if and when they need to address it. This is also critical because, you know, at times, if there's an IT problem, it's possible that email doesn't work at that point in time either. Another one to point out here is two-factor authentication. So this is the concept of protecting your systems not just by username and password, but by username, password, and then a one-time PIN delivered to the user via SMS. You know, we see this being used by some of the largest companies in the world for their consumers and for their staff as well. And there's a real way to add an additional layer of security to your data. And you know, the same principle can be used for things like custom and system resets. Critically, it's companies that look at the possible ways to take advantage of this channel across their entire business instead of focusing on a particular use case are really in a prime position to benefit. And ultimately, that benefit, when you spread it out across the entire business, will be felt by more engaged staff and customers, which ultimately leads to two things. That previous graph I showed where operating margin was being squeezed, that trend is significantly reversed. I can't stress enough that I've seen this happen in the logistics world, in the retail world, and in manufacturing, with some of the world's largest businesses spread out across multiple territories and locations. Implementing text-based engagement services across multiple departments leads to a dramatic reduction in costs and an increase in revenue, purely because information is being communicated much more effectively. So with that, I'd like to jump to some key takeaways. Crucially, now is absolutely the right time to look at how to optimize your business operations using the mobile channel. You have an engaged consumer base who are attending to the mobile channel today. There are other technologies that are coming in the next 5 to 10 years that will be good for the logistics world. But right now, the addressable area is people engaged on their mobile and the best ways in which to communicate with them. For time-critical services, SMS has a far higher superior delivery rate and read rate. Again, we're looking at 95% of text messages are opened and read within 5 minutes of being delivered, and 85% of people will look at a text message before they'll look at any other form of communication. And a far higher action rate, again 20 to 40%, as opposed to 4 to 8% for email, which genuinely translates to real monetary value in terms of lower costs and higher revenues. And finally, consider your wider business needs to extract even greater value. Now, this isn't a one-trick pony for one particular area of your business. The companies that look at how to make this work for their whole business across multiple use cases are the ones that will succeed the most. And a little bit about us, just so that you've got a bit of background, so that you can understand that we're actually, what we're talking about. We're a global provider of mobile engagement technology, working with some of the biggest organizations in the world to help them drive down costs and increase revenue. We process over 1 billion messages per month across a full range of use cases and in over 200 countries. I'd love to discuss more, but we probably don't have that much time, and I want to leave a little bit spare for Q&A. I'll leave my contact details up, so please do shoot me an email if you have any questions that you'd like me to address offline, or if you'd like me to pick up on any more of the statistics or figures that I've talked about in the last 30 minutes. With that, I'll hand back to Harry.
CMAC, thank you for that. Thanks for outlining the details on mobile engagement there. We've had a couple questions come in, so I wanted to jump straight through to those. And so you mentioned a number of statistics throughout the presentation there. So we've had a couple questions come in on where have these come from. So I was hoping you could perhaps talk us through a little bit more about where some of these statistics have come from, if you know any background on them, etc.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to provide those in more details. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, I can point them to where they've come from. But they will come from various places. Some of them will come from industry bodies. The ones that I referenced earlier, one that I referenced earlier was IMRG in the UK, who are a retail group. looking at trends within the retail market and costs and how to kind of calculate those costs. That's one key one. Another area were sets of research that we've actually commissioned. So we've gone out to the market and taken cross sections of either consumers, across different demographics, or we've taken surveys and feedback from kind of business leaders across different areas of industry. Some of them will be in logistics, some of them in retail, some of them in manufacturing, and got their take and their thoughts on kind of what operates and what works well. So from a variety of sources, some from industry bodies and some from direct research that we performed ourselves across 500, 1,000, 10,000 people, depending on the report.
I had a specific one here just on customer feedback and the low rate of repeat customers. I was wondering if you could just source that one specifically, just to let the audience know.
So customer feedback, do you remember which one that was? Which?
So it was one of the later slides where you were looking at, just customer feedback based on text messaging.
So the number being 20% of people who provide feedback.
Yeah, I believe that was it.
Yes. Yeah. So those ones are actually borne out across customer feedback programs that we've actually set up and run via SMS across our entire business for the last few years. So we typically see, in the aggregate across lots of the business that we work with, a text-based feedback campaign leads to at least a 20% response rate, and that's compared to relatively industry standards, which you can find in lots of industry reports, of around 4% for email trigger campaigns. So that's kind of where those ones come from. So the text-based ones are real-world examples based on data that we have.
All right, perfect. So a number of questions have come through asking about getting a copy of the PowerPoint deck, and I can handle that one actually. And the answer is yes, we'll be sending that, and it's going to take about a week's time for us to edit things out. Like there's the break in the middle there, so we'll edit that out and we'll send that to you in about a week's time. But moving on, we've got a lot of questions coming in actually. So are there any specific problems that you've encountered regarding gathering cell phone information? Cell phone data, contact information?
I guess the question there is about is there any reticence amongst consumers to provide that information?
Yeah.
I guess is the main question. The answer is it depends on how upfront and honest you are as a brand and a business. So we work with lots of different types of companies of different sizes. And as long as the key message is always the same. As long as you're providing relevant information, so that's contextually relevant and delivered at the right time, people are happy to share their contact information in order to get that because they're getting value out of it. And it's particularly the case where you're looking at more operationally focused messaging. Your packages will be with you tomorrow at 1 p.m. That's a valuable message to get. Where it becomes trickier is if you then start using that message to cross-promote certain services that the user didn't realize you were going to do. So that's when people have a little bit more uncertainty about providing their messages. But as long as, their phone numbers, but as long as you're providing contextually relevant and timely information that's of value to the user, then it's usually not that difficult to actually convince people to give over that information because they're getting value from it.
So a number of questions coming here, just on the customer's side of things, basically. So obviously, when you receive a text message, you tend to think of that as a mechanism to communicate back with somebody. So how do you manage that that feedback expectation and sort of help customers in terms of resolving problems, let's say?
So when you say customer, are we talking about the kind of end consumer or the person triggering the message there, do you think?
Yeah, so the end consumer. Say I've got a parcel coming and they've texted me saying it's coming in the next hour. I can't be there in the next hour, so I want to respond back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that raises a really interesting point because one of the points that we've found has been really, raises a really frustrating point for a lot of consumers is that specific scenario where you cannot reply. So let's say that you receive a text message saying your package will be with you in 1 hour, but you're not going to be in at that point in time. If there isn't a response, if there isn't a way that you can reply to that message, if it's just a dead-end bit of information, that's a really, really poor experience for the consumer because, it's a stressful situation then at that point. They're not going to be in and they can't do anything about it. So I think that it's absolutely critical for those sorts of things that first of all is a response mechanic. There is a way that the consumer can do that, and that's borne out through lots of conversations and information directly with consumers. Secondly, when you are offering a response mechanic, it just needs to be clear and concise and low effort. The key is always low effort, right? The reason text is so successful is because engaging with it can and should be low effort. So having something like 1 or 2 really clear options where all the user needs to do is text back a number, and then your system will do the rest and figure out what you mean by that number is the best way of doing it. If you start asking them to kind of outline things in detail, then it becomes more frustrating and the response rate starts to suffer.
So one question here that sort of steps slightly away from logistics. We have someone asking about implementing such a system with a patient situation.
Yeah.
Business to patient. So have you had experience in that, and can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really key one, and it's actually very, very similar to the delivery notifications. I know that one of the major costs, one of the big costs for most kind of healthcare facilities is basically patients not showing up. Whether that's a public or private healthcare facility, it costs money every single time a patient doesn't turn up to an appointment. And so do not attend or DNA rates are typically, it can vary depending on where they are, but they're always too high. And using text as a mechanic, first of all, to remind the user that they have an appointment. We've seen reduced DNA rates by about 20-25%, and then adding in oh, and by the way, text back, 1 if you want to call back to change that appointment, or text back 1 if you want to change your appointment to tomorrow. Reduces it again by another 5-10%. So it absolutely is transferable to the kind of patient kind of turn up rates or do not attend rates. But definitely, I'm happy to pick that one up separately if the attendee is interested.
Absolutely. So we've got a load of questions here, as you can tell. So I'll go through a couple more before we cut things off, just because there's a lot here that are going to be quite interesting for the audience. So we're going to be working with OpenMarket on one of our U.S. shows, the Logistics CIO Forum. And so I have a question that's very U.S. specific in the sense that SMS is an expense to customers in the U.S. market. How have you guys been able to manage that?
There is an expense to customers. A lot of customers in the US, I'm not an expert in the US market, so I'd be happy to introduce you to one of my US colleagues who works out there and is probably better placed than me to answer. However, there's a few things that I will say. A lot of the US market have kind of buckets of text messages which are just basically unlimited at this point in time. So that cost, for not all the market, but for a sizable portion of the market, kind of disappears. It's kind of assumed as a sunk cost. Additionally, it kind of comes down to the value proposition again. So if you're delivering valuable information that's actually valuable to the user, then it's welcome information. And it kind of comes down to, and maybe you need to take a stronger view over what's valuable, where there is a potential cost to the consumer. But it kind of comes down to that point where I made towards discussing the delivery notifications, where a missed delivery, cost the carrier £6.53, I think it was. But it also cost the consumer. It cost the consumer over £1 in that case in the UK. So let's say it costs $1.50 for the user to miss that delivery, to have to reschedule it, to have to turn around certain elements of their life to actually be in at another time, to call the carrier or call the retailer, spend some time on the phone to reschedule that delivery. All of that costs money, and it certainly costs more than the few cents that a text message will cost them. So it's a valuable transaction.
And so another one. So in the UK, e-commerce is massive for even us as consumers. We tend to order everything online, it seems. But the US is a bit lagging behind us, and other parts of the world are different places as well. And so just, I guess, more specifically to when those places catch on, how practical is SMS if the number of deliveries a day is actually quite significant? Is there a maximum, any maximums, any restrictions there, or how does that work?
There are kind of best practice guidelines for the kind of number of text messages that you should send a day or a week or a month. Unfortunately, there isn't a hard number, and there shouldn't be, simply because, again, it comes down to relevancy and value. If I as the consumer I'm expecting 3 deliveries, it's valuable for me to get 3 text messages. If I'm expecting 10 deliveries over the course of the week, I don't want an artificial cap to stop me from receiving some of those messages. So on the consumer side, I'd say it always comes again down to the relevancy and the value of those messages. So the best practice is around having a sensible conversation with internally about what makes sense. From a business side, in terms of the practicality of it, if you're going from 100 deliveries a day to 1 million deliveries a day, I wouldn't look at the cost of then having to deliver 1 million messages. I'd look at the cost associated with an increased number of potentially failed deliveries, and that cost there is going to far outweigh the cost that you spend on kind of sending those messages. So it really is relative, and I'd say that in fact the more volume that you that exists from an e-commerce perspective, the more deliveries that there are, in actual fact, the more valuable having a system in place where you can communicate better with the consumer and avoid missed deliveries and get more feedback is actually more valuable to you as a business. The more that it happens.
Well, thanks for that, CMAC. There's loads of questions here. We could spend the rest of the afternoon probably talking about the different ins and outs of the technology you guys are working with, and the impact it's having on logistics and many other industries. But I wanted to cut things there. Thank you for...
I was just going to say, I'd encourage anybody just to, if we haven't answered the questions, shoot them over to me. Happy to pick them up offline.
Perfect. Yes, and as you can see, CMAC's email is there. I'll be sending around copies of the webinar next week, thereabouts. And we'll also be seeing Open Market, if you're in the Austin region, in April. The 20th and 21st, they're going to be involved in our Logistics CIO Forum, which is an event where we discuss the ins and outs of technology and their impact on logistics. Really good lineup actually coming together for that event with a number of the CIOs of the top logistics companies working out of North America. So Open Market will be there, so you'll have that chance to discuss face-to-face on those U.S.-specific questions. But until then, I would like to thank CMAC for speaking with us today, and I would like to wish the rest of you a happy rest of the day.